So Stellar Crown has officially released, and with its release the format is going to go through quite a big change. We have a lot of new cards that will be entering the format, and thus new decks will be appearing, as well as previous decks will be updated to make them even stronger than they were before. One of those decks being the very deck you see in front of you, a deck that I have been playing since it originally released in Twilight Masquerade, Dragapult EX. Dragapult EX was slated to be this meta-dominating threat because of how it was doing over in Japan, and in Japan it is still considered to be one of the best decks alongside, I think it's Charizard and currently Raging Bolt EX. However, in the West, Dragapult did almost nothing. It's gotten a few tops here and there, as in like once every regional, but other than that, the deck has not nearly been seen as much success as people thought it was going to. After all, the Japanese meta and the Western meta will obviously be different because of how the game is designed and played, because over in Japan it's a best of one format, it's not best of three, whereas over in the West we have best of three, so deck choices and what's going to be good and what isn't is going to be dictated very heavily by that type of format. However, with the release of Stellar Crown, I personally think that Dragapult is going to see a lot more play and a lot more success thanks to some brand new tools and support. And even then, the tools and support it gets is only a couple of cards, but with those cards, this deck gets even stronger. As I said before, I've been playing Dragapult since it released in Twilight Masquerade, so I may know a thing or two about the deck. I'm obviously not a professional at the deck. I do make misplays quite often. I'm also not playing the most popular version of the deck, which is the Pidgeot version. I have been thinking of leaning more towards that version, but for the moment I'm sticking with the version that I have been playing all this time, which is the Xatu version. So without further ado, let's get into said deck profile. Starting off with the Dragapult lineup, free Dreepy. Obviously it's, your main Pokemon, you want to get multiple into play, you want to see as many as you can, because Dragapult is obviously your main attacker, your main damage dealer, so you want to max out on this. Maybe if you're playing the hybrid version with, Pidgeot and Charizard, you could maybe play 3, but 4 is obviously the mainstay, it's what you have to do. 3 Dracloak, I still think 3 is correct. 4 is a bit bricky, and sometimes you might want to rare candy a Dreepy into Dragapult, but a majority of the time, especially if you go second, you're going to be looking for your team evolution to get some Dracloaks into play, allowing you to filter through your deck, get cards you need, and put away ones that you don't really need at the time, which means that you can then use other cards to, draw through your deck and ensure that you have a higher chance of seeing what you may need. And then the big boy himself, 3 Dragapult, Fire and a Psychic, you can do 200 damage and then put 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon in any way you like. So you're basically doing 260 damage for 2 energy. Granted they are 2 different energy types, but we can mitigate that with obviously, other engines, other cards, like with the Pidgeot version you would use Neo Upper Energy, which counts as 2 different energy while it's equipped to a stage 2 Pokemon. And of course you have Xatu, which can attach a Psychic Energy to a bench Pokemon and draw you 2 cards, which is the version that I am playing 2 Natu and 2 Xatu. Most of the time you're only going to have 1 on the bench because you don't really need more than 1. Since your attacks only cost 2 energy, you can obviously attach for turn, then Xatu to get that energy on to get the Psychic Energy into play. But this deck does take a little bit of time to get itself going, so over the course of a few turns you're obviously going to be attaching energies, and then you're going to have your Xatu, which can just help get that extra energy into play, so now you have multiple Dragapults and you're also drawing cards in the process. And then for just the random one-ofs, Manaphy, because bench sniping Pokemon are a big problem for this deck. Obviously it doesn't stop stuff like Dust Noir and Dusclops, I think they are, because they place damage counters and they're also on an ability, so other cards such as Rabsca won't do anything because it only protects from attacks. But it's also there for stuff like Regidrago with Kyurem, stop your opponent from basically taking 3 KOs from 1 attack. Mimikyu, this one is something that works and then sometimes it doesn't. It's there as like a little bit of a stall Pokemon. You can just keep it in the active while you're powering up your own Pokemon and getting your attackers ready and your supporters ready. And it's also something that basically forces your opponent to commit more resources into moving it out of the active, or it forces them to maybe start powering up a Pokemon that they normally wouldn't, just so that they can, attack and get rid of it. Again, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it is there just as like a little sneaky sort of tech option. Plus, his attack isn't too bad, you can put 70 damage on your opponent's active Pokemon. Radiant Alakazam, I still think that this is the best Radiant for this deck specifically. If you're playing the Charizard build or you're playing the Pidgeot build, you could play Radiant Zard, which in the late game can do a lot of damage for a single energy depending on how many prizes your opponent has taken. But I personally think Radiant Alakazam is the better option because you can manipulate damage counters around. Say your opponent benches a new Pokemon after you've already attacked, you can move some of that damage onto the new Pokemon and possibly get it in range of a KO. Say it's a basic with 70 HP, you could move 10 from the Pokemon that you attacked in the active, and then you could attack the active again, possibly knock it out, and then put the 6 on that new bench Pokemon to knock it out as well. Rotom V, not playing Lumineon V anymore because we are playing a higher support account, and Rotom V is just the better out of the two because it allows you to draw cards in the early game and help fill up your hand for future turns. Plus we need a V Pokemon for, obviously, Forest Sealstone. Fezandipity EX Flip the Script allows you to draw 3 cards every time one of your Pokemon is knocked out. So you possibly could argue that you could play Lumineon over Rotom V because, you know, Fezandipity can just draw you 3 cards whenever a Pokemon is knocked out and it doesn't end your turn in the process. But I still think Rotom V is good for the early game because you could possibly bench Fezandipity and then your opponent, you know, doesn't attack or they don't do enough damage to knock out and therefore it's just sat there waiting to be knocked out itself. So I still think Rotom V is a must include. You could argue to put in Lumineon because, you know, you might be drawing 3 cards every turn. Again, early game draw is very nice because this relies on your opponent obviously attacking and knocking out, which they might not be able to do in the early game if they've bricked, because this deck can also brick, is very well known to brick. It happens quite a lot. I have a lot of experience with that type of thing. Moving on to the supporter cards. Arven, best supporter in the deck, allowed to grab an item and a tool card, so you could grab Forest Sealstone and Nest Ball, or you could grab Earthen Vessel and Rescue Board, you could grab, you know, Earthen Vessel and TM Evolution, so then you can get your energy, attach TM Evolution, attach an energy, and evolve. It's just the best one, especially in evolution decks. Iono, it allows us to, you know, manipulate our opponent's hand in a way, allows us to force our opponent down to a low amount of cards if they've taken so many prize cards, also allows us to dig through our deck. You could use this and then start using your recon directives, so you're looking at even more cards on top of your deck. It's more of a benefit than a detriment. Sure, you might be putting away cards that you may need at that time, and it does use up a supporter, so if you draw into another supporter, you then can't use that. There has been many times where this has helped me win a game, and there has been many times where it's, you know, lost me the game. I have been thinking about cutting it down to 2 and playing something else in its place, maybe a Roxanne or something like that, but that's all up in the air at the moment. I'm still tinkering around with some stuff, so that is something that could change, because the last deck profile I uploaded, loads of stuff changed after I uploaded that. The deck was not what it looked like after I uploaded that video. 2 boss's orders, so you could, you know, do 200 damage to the active, do a little bit of chip damage to the bench, then boss up that chip damage Pokemon, knock it out, do chip damage to the bench again. So you could put some chip damage on, you know, some basic EX Pokemon or some basic V Pokemon, and then you could boss them up so you can hit that 200 damage if they're just a little bit higher, like Fezandipity is 210, so you could hit that 200, knock it out, and then, you know, spread around some more damage for a possible de-evolution, or maybe look to do multiple knockouts later on in the game. Plus it also allows you to, you know, play around your opponent's own stall cards and stun cards, like Snorlax for example. You could boss something up, allows you to retreat, so then you can start doing stuff on your turn. It's just obviously something you want to include in like every deck. And then the 2 new supporter cards from Stellar Crown, Crispin and Briar. So Crispin says that you can search your deck for 2 basic energy cards, attach one of them to one of your Pokemon, and then put the other into your hand. They also have to be different types, very much like Mirage Gate. So it allows you to obviously get an extra energy into play, and then you can also add an energy into your hand, so you could attach the Psychic, add the Fire, and then attach the Fire for turn, and now Dragapult is ready to attack. And then Briar says you can only use it when your opponent has 2 prize cards remaining, and if one of your Terra Pokemon knocks out your opponent's active Pokemon, you take an additional prize card. So your opponent's down to 2 prizes, you're on like, let's say 4 prizes, but you've done enough damage to where you can knock out a V Pokemon or an EX Pokemon as well as just a random basic Pokemon on the bench. You can activate this, and now when you knock out that V Pokemon or EX Pokemon on the active, you're going to take 3 prize cards, and then you're also going to take the additional 1 from the bench. It basically just allows you to basically get a win out of nowhere. You could take 4 prizes in a single turn. If you've got a EX or V on the bench that's ready to be knocked out, you could take 5 prize cards. It is a very strong card, and given how slow this deck can tend to be, you tend to get behind a bit, but with this you can basically just win the game out of nowhere. It's a very powerful card. Also, it basically forces your opponent to kind of like do a prize counting type of thing where they don't want to put themselves down to 2 prizes just in case you have Briar. Item cards: 4 Buddy Buddy Poffin, or should I say Buddy Buddy Poffin and 3 Dicky for a Knusp. Search your deck for 2 Pokemon with 70 HP, Dreepy, Natu, Mimikyu, Manaphy, just whatever you need really. It's a mainstay in evolution decks. 3 Nest Balls, so we can get stuff that, you know, isn't basics. We can get our Vs, we can get our Fezandipity EX, or, you know, we could just get another basic. It's just, you know, there you can just get whatever you want. Also, I've decided to finally use my European International Championship promo version, because it's just been sat in the binder for however long ago that event was. Ultra Ball, we can get Xatu, we can get Dracloak, we can get Dragapult, we can get, you know, a V Pokemon, we can get an EX Pokemon, just a very good all-around search card. 2 Rare Candy, because we're only running the 1 Stage 2 line. If you're playing the Pidgeot build or the Charizard build, then you obviously want to play 4 of this. But we're only playing 2 because we actually want to evolve into the Dracloak, and we're only really using this on Dreepy to evolve into Dragapult. We don't have the additional line of Pidgey into Pidgeot. If you're playing that version, you obviously want to play 4. 2 Earthen Vessels, so we can get, you know, our energy cards if Crispin doesn't really work out for us. 2 Night Stretchers, so we can get energy as well as Pokemon back from the discard. So say your opponent knocks out a Dragapult EX, you could activate this, get the Dragapult back, evolve a Dracloak into a new one, and then you can start attacking again. Counter Catcher, because we tend to get behind on the game, so we could bring up something, knock it out, or deal some damage to it and then start spreading around damage. 1 Switch, because Control is a matchup, and this deck kind of struggles a little bit with Control, but most of the time Control matchups are pretty free for this deck. It just depends how quickly you can get going, but this just like helps a little bit. Tool cards: Evolution, so we can evolve into Xatu, Natu, whichever one it is, and Dracloaks if we go second. De-evolution, this is good against stuff like Charizard, against the mirror match. Well, not really against the mirror match, depends if they evolve into Dracloaks, but it is good against Charizard. If they use up all of their rare candies, you can de-evolution them, and now they don't really have a way to evolve back into the Charizard unless they play Charmeleon, which most of the time they only play 1, so it is a very good card to play. Sealstone, so we can get any card we want from the deck. Rescue Board, because everything in this deck has 1 retreat cost except Radiant Alakazam, so we basically can have a free retreat Pokemon that we could move into the active and then move out if we need to go into anything else. Very much gives us a pivot option for when a Pokemon is knocked out. And then our A-Spec, Sparkling Crystal. This card says that, let me actually get it right, when the Terra Pokemon this card is attached to uses its attack, it costs 1 less energy. So this basically lets us use Phantom Dive for a singular energy. We can do 260 damage for 1 energy, which is very, very powerful. Not to mention that Arven can search this because it's a tool card, so you could Arven for maybe Rare Candy or Earthen Vessel to then get your energy, then you can attach, and now you suddenly have a Dragapult ready to attack, and you can do this very easily on like your second turn of the game. It's a very strong card. I'm still not certain if I want to play this over stuff like Counter Catcher, Prime Catcher, maybe Reset Stamp. I still think this is really, really good. I'm going to be testing it for the foreseeable future, see how I get on with it. I'm pretty content that this is the best A-Spec for this deck. Like any version of the deck, the Pidgeot build, and maybe with the Pidgeot build you'd still play Neo Upper Energy, but this is kind of better because, you know, you can search in the Pidgeot build, even though Pidgeot can search, you know, literally anything. But maybe in that version you'd still play Neo Upper Energy, all depends. But in this build, I think Sparkling Crystal is the best A-Spec to play. Collapse Stadium, so we can get rid of, you know, Rotom V on the bench if it's already done its job, or we can get rid of basically something that our opponent can very easily knock out, like a V or EX Pokemon, because we don't want to give them 2 prizes. And then for energy, free Psychic and free Fire, it used to be 4 and 3, but because of Sparkling Crystal we can cut down the energy by 1, since now our attack can only cost 1 energy if we have the Sparkling Crystal. Plus you only really attack with Dragapult unless you want to attack with something like the Mimikyu. And that is the updated Dragapult deck profile. Let me know in the comments your thoughts about this deck. Have you been playing this deck? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you think these new cards will make it appear more in the, in the meta in the future? Do you think it's gonna, become the dominant threat that it is over in Japan? Let me know your thoughts. Do you think there's anything I could change in this build? Maybe try and fit the Luminion V back in? Maybe try and fit some other sort of cards in? What builds have you been playing? Let me know. But other than that, I would like to thank you for watching the video. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe for future videos. I was about to say follow me on Twitter. Instead of doing that, keep an eye on my community page, because that's mainly where I post updates. Stop really using Twitter. I might close down my Twitter account, because I really don't end up using it. I mainly use the community page, because it's just easier, everything's all in one place rather than you have to go to another app to see updates. You can just be like, okay, I've seen the YouTube video, community page, oh, here's all the updates. You don't have to whittle between different apps. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I shall see you in the next video, whatever that may be. Take care.